I never imagined a simple road trip could change everything. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the horizon with streaks of orange and pink. I glanced over at him, my boyfriend, my comfort, my routine. We were both excited, music playing softly in the car, and the road ahead stretched endlessly, full of possibilities. We had planned this trip for weeks. The kind of plan where every playlist, every snack, and every pit stop was meticulously chosen. It was supposed to be a weekend of laughter, long drives, and maybe even arguments that would dissolve as quickly as they came. We were somewhere between the city and nowhere, the roads winding through hills and forests, when we noticed her. She was standing at the side of the highway, thumb out, looking tired, maybe a little lost. Instinctively, I hesitated. He, on the other hand, slowed the car without a second thought. "You think we should stop?" he asked, a hint of curiosity in his voice. I nodded, though a little nervously. There was something about her presence, her calm, almost magnetic aura, that made me pause. She climbed into the back seat, thanked us with a warm, disarming smile, and introduced herself. Her name was Emily. She had a voice that could make silence feel alive, and eyes that seemed to look straight through everything, straight into the core of who you were. As she told her story, lost, car trouble, trying to get to a small town a few hours away. I felt a strange pull, a quiet fascination I couldn't quite explain. The drive continued, laughter and conversation flowing naturally, but I couldn't ignore it, the subtle shift in the air, the way my attention kept drifting toward her. She wasn't part of our plan, yet somehow, she was exactly what I didn't know I was missing. By the time we reached our first rest stop, I realized something unsettling. This wasn't just a detour for her. Somehow, this stranger had changed the trajectory of the trip, and maybe even the trajectory of my heart. We pulled into the rest stop, the car engine ticking as it cooled. He went inside to grab some snacks, leaving me alone with Emily for a moment. It felt strange, not uncomfortable, but electric. There was something in the way she leaned against the car, casual but deliberate, brushing her hair behind her ear, that made my chest tighten. "Thanks for picking me up," she said softly, her eyes meeting mine. I wasn't sure anyone would stop. I shrugged, trying to play it cool, but my fingers fidgeted against the steering wheel. "It's no problem," I said. "We're headed that way anyway." She smiled again, and it wasn't just polite, it was warm, genuine, and somehow intimate. I caught myself studying her, the curve of her smile, the way she tilted her head when she laughed. I felt a sudden, undeniable awareness of her presence, like the world had subtly shifted in this small, quiet rest stop. When he returned, the dynamic changed again. He chatted with Emily, and for a while, it felt like the three of us were just friends, sharing stories and jokes. But I noticed the way my laughter felt louder, sharper, more alive when it came from her. The way my thoughts kept drifting back to her when I should have been listening to him. By the time we got back on the road, I was acutely aware of how I sat closer to her, how my hand brushed hers just a little longer than necessary when I handed her a bottle of water, and how my mind kept replaying the sound of her laugh. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I had a boyfriend. I had plans. And yet, with every mile, every shared glance, every fleeting touch, I felt myself being drawn to her in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying. The road stretched ahead, endless and winding, and so did the possibilities. I didn't know it yet, but that simple decision, to pick up a stranger, was about to unravel everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the choices that define us. The car hummed along the highway, the scenery blurring into green hills and golden sunlight. He was singing along to the radio, oblivious to the current swirling between Emily and me. I tried to focus on the road, but it was impossible. Every time I glanced at her in the rearview mirror, our eyes met, just for a second, and then she'd look away, a small smile tugging at her lips. I could feel it, something unspoken, simmering beneath the surface. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was electric. Every word she said seemed to linger longer than it should. Every laugh felt like it was meant for me alone. My heartbeat quickened, though I hated myself for noticing. We stopped at a small roadside cafe for lunch. He went inside first, and Emily and I followed a moment later. We ended up seated together at a corner table, far enough from the crowd that no one could overhear us. Conversation flowed easily. She told me about her life, her dreams, little fragments of herself that felt dangerously intimate. I found myself sharing more than I usually would, revealing small truths about me I had never said aloud. For a moment, the world shrank to just the two of us, a bubble of light and warmth in the middle of an ordinary cafe. Her fingers brushed mine when she reached for her coffee, and my hand didn't pull away. I wanted to look at him, to measure my loyalty, but I couldn't. Not when every part of me wanted to lean closer to her, to stay there in that stolen, fleeting space. When he returned, I felt the shift immediately, the invisible tension snapping back into place. I smiled, pretending nothing had happened, but my mind was racing. I knew something had changed. Something about Emily wasn't just temporary. It had already started to root itself deep inside me, and I couldn't ignore it, even if I wanted to. The drive continued, longer and quieter now, each mile a reminder that this road trip had become more than a getaway. It was a journey into the unknown, a journey that would force me to confront choices I had never imagined I'd face. Night fell as we continued down the highway, the car's headlights cutting through darkness that felt endless. The radio played softly, but the music barely registered. I was too aware of her presence beside me, the subtle way she shifted in her seat, the warmth that seemed to radiate even through the fabric of her jacket. He was driving, talking about nothing in particular, and I caught myself tuning out his words. My attention kept drifting to Emily. She laughed at a joke I didn't even hear, and something in me tightened, a mixture of envy and longing. It was impossible to ignore, and even more impossible to deny. At a rest stop, he stepped out to stretch his legs, leaving Emily and me alone in the car. We sat in silence at first, just listening to the night and the faint hum of passing traffic. Then she looked at me, really looked at me, and I felt my heart stutter. "I'm glad I got a ride with you tonight," she said softly. "I don't know. There's something about this trip that feels different." I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of the proximity of her face, the way her hair caught the dim light, the gentle curve of her lips when she smiled. My hand rested on the console, close to hers, and I felt an electric pull that made me ache. "Different good? Or different bad?" I asked, my voice quieter than I expected. She smiled, a slow, teasing smile that sent shivers down my spine. "Different good," she said. And then, without thinking, without planning it, our fingers brushed. Just a small touch, fleeting, but it was enough. Enough to ignite a fire I hadn't known was there. By the time he returned to the car, I knew nothing would be the same. Something had shifted between us, a quiet, undeniable spark that couldn't be ignored. And as the engine roared back to life and the road stretched ahead, I realized that I was standing at the edge of a choice I couldn't escape: stay loyal to what I knew, or explore something that felt terrifyingly, wonderfully real. We finally reached a small motel just past midnight. The kind of place that smelled faintly of pine cleaner and old carpet, but for some reason, it felt intimate, almost suspended in time. He was busy checking in and getting the keys, talking about the next day's route, oblivious to the tension that had settled like a weight in the back seat. Emily and I were alone for a moment in the dimly lit lobby. I felt the heat of her presence again, the way she moved through the space with ease, as if she belonged wherever she went. Her eyes found mine, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to vanish. Later, in the motel room, we unpacked in separate corners, but the air between us was charged. He was distracted by the TV, scrolling through his phone, unaware of the subtle glances we exchanged. Every small movement, every quiet breath she took, made my pulse quicken. I knew he couldn't see it, but I could feel it, the pull, the unspoken tension. "Do you always drive strangers around?" I asked softly, trying to break the silence without drawing too much attention. She laughed, a sound that was light, teasing, but it made my chest ache. "Not usually. But something about tonight felt different." Her voice trailed off, and for a moment, she looked at me as though trying to read my thoughts. I caught her hand briefly when reaching for a water bottle, just for a second, but it lingered longer than necessary. I felt the spark again, undeniable and electric, and I hated myself for feeling it, but I couldn't stop. The night stretched ahead, long and quiet, filled with moments that felt stolen, suspended. Something unspoken was growing between us, delicate but dangerous. I could sense it in her smiles, her silences, the way her gaze seemed to find me no matter where I was in the room. And somewhere deep down, I knew the next day wouldn't just be about the road trip anymore. It would be about choices, about what we wanted, about who we were willing to risk everything for, and about a connection that neither of us had expected but both of us couldn't ignore. The next morning, the sun spilled gold across the horizon, but the warmth inside me was nothing like the sunlight. It was something else, something that had grown overnight, quiet but undeniable. Emily was sitting on the motel balcony, sipping coffee, watching the road stretch endlessly before us. I joined her, the air thick with things we couldn't yet say aloud. He was inside, making breakfast, humming softly. Oblivious. And I realized with a strange clarity that this trip was no longer his alone or ours together. It belonged to me too, to this unexpected connection that had crept into every moment, every glance, every heartbeat. "Do you want to come back on the road with me?" Emily asked suddenly, turning toward me with that calm intensity that had first drawn me in. Her eyes held a question, yes, but also a challenge. I hesitated, heart hammering. Everything I had known. My plans, my relationship, my sense of right and wrong was colliding with what I wanted, what I felt. I thought about him, about loyalty, about the life I had mapped out. And then I thought about her, the way she made me feel seen, alive, desired in ways I hadn't imagined. I think I do, I whispered, and even saying it out loud made it feel real, irrevocable. We didn't need more words. The decision had been made in glances, in touches, in quiet moments of connection that had been growing since the first mile of the trip. I turned to find him in the doorway, and I knew I had to face him, had to acknowledge that things had changed. "I need to figure things out," I said softly. He looked at me, confusion flickering across his face. He didn't argue. Somehow, he understood that the journey I was on wasn't just about the road, it was about following something deeper, something I couldn't ignore. Hand in hand with Emily, I walked toward the car, a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration coursing through me. The road stretched ahead, unknown and infinite, but for the first time in my life, I didn't care about the map, the plan, or the safety of the familiar. I only cared about her. And as the tires rolled onto the asphalt, the world felt alive with possibilities, with danger, with hope, and with a love that I had chosen, hers, mine, and ours together.